Happy day, this is Dr. Ramya Raman, Head MBA Program, Department of Management Studies. Today we would be discussing about research journey from topic selection to report presentation. The first and foremost step in the research process is to identify a research topic. Keep in mind that you will have to choose a research topic which is close to your heart and mind so that you would be able to carry it over till the end of your research project. Narrow down your research to the current trends, availability of data and personal curiosity. For instance, if a person is interested in automobiles or cars, maybe they can pursue a research in the future of car industry like electric vehicles or driverless cars. Once the topic is broadened, the next step and foremost is a literature review. You need to read extensively a lot of journals and articles supporting to your research. So there are n number of databases such as Google Scholar, JSTOR, ProQuest and InflipNet where you would be able to find a repository of research databases. Although we mentioned that there should be at least 20 to 30 literature reviews. Literature review continues till the end of your research project. So there are tools such as Zotero, Mendeley and EndNote where you can actually compile your data as a research library so that at the end when you are giving citations, it would not reflect in your plagiarism. Once you do the literature review, the next step is to find the research gap. While you read a lot of articles, you would be able to find what others have contributed to the study and what was missed in the study. Whatever they have missed or unexplored becomes your research gap, which will pave way for your objective and problem statement. For example, in HR, you might take about the recent innovations in AI in HR, automation, ESG or diversity, equity and inclusion, which are the current trends. I have also mentioned about the conceptual model here. Once you have decided on the topic, you will have to understand in a diagrammatic format as to how you are going to go about in your research. This is an example of the influence of leadership style on the employee performance. As you all know, there are various types of leaders and how it is influencing on the employee performance is a part of this study. The next step after the conceptual framework is to frame the objectives and hypothesis. When you are using the term objectives, the choice of words matters a lot. For example, if you say to test the association between variables, then you are mentioning that you are going to do a chi-square. The choice of words in your research objective is mandatory for the reader to understand what type of test are you going to proceed with. For example, to test the association between age and the smoking habits, it determines that you are going to do a chi-square test. For example, to understand the relationship between, then it is correlation. If you want to go one step further to find the impact between the variables, then it means that you are going to do a regression. To determine the significant difference, if you are going to use this word, then it means that you are going to do a t-test or an ANOVA. If there are various factors, for example, if you want to understand what are the factors which are influencing job satisfaction, it might be pay, it might be incentives, it might be role, it might be designation or it might be autonomy. So if there are n number of factors and if you want to reduce the dimension of factors to understand what is the factor which is most influencing, then you would be doing a factor analysis. So accordingly, when you frame the objectives, the reader should be able to understand what type of test you are going to do. Once you have framed the objectives, the next step is to test the hypothesis. Hypothesis is nothing but an assumption statement. There can be two answers for any question. One is there is relationship, the other one is there is no relationship. You frame the hypothesis even before you collect the questionnaire and the analysis, and at the end, once you do the analysis, you disprove or approve the hypothesis which you have already set. The next thing is research design. Research design is nothing but the blueprint of your entire research. By seeing the research design, the reader would be able to understand a capstone of your entire research project. For instance, what type of research are you going to use in your study? There are various types of research: quantitative, qualitative, empirical, conceptual, descriptive or exploratory. For example, in a qualitative study, if you are going to do a focus group discussion with a set of people, you use a qualitative study. Quantitative study, as we all do, is a structured questionnaire where we collect database and analysis. The next one is empirical, where you do a research based on evidences. Conceptual paper is nothing but just collection of literature review and summarizing the review, that also is a paper. Descriptive is nothing but describing things as it is and finding a causal relationship between variables. Exploratory study is often conducted when you are going to find something new in the field of research. Once you decide on what type of research are you going to do, the next step is, as we saw already, framing of objectives and hypothesis. Once you do that, you understand the scope of the study. Who would be your sample? Which area are you going to concentrate for collecting your sample? The period of the study is more important. Usually for a PG project it is 3 months, and for a PhD it might go from 3 years to 5 years. Once you do that, obviously a research is not restricted without limitations. Whatever is your limitation, you mention that in your research study. After that, you decide on the sampling style. There are two types of sampling. One is probabilistic sampling, the other one is non-probabilistic sampling. If you have a database and if you have to choose respondents based on the database, you use probabilistic sampling. If you do not have a database, then you would be using a non-probabilistic. To give an instance, if a class teacher wants to select 5 students, she can obviously select from the attendance register randomly 5 students. Then she would be selecting probabilistic sampling. If you have to go to the road to take a survey, you would not be having the database of the respondents, then you would be going for a non-probabilistic sampling. Once you have decided on the sampling style, the next stage comes the data collection, where you collect data by means of structured questionnaires. Once you collect the data from structured questionnaire, the next step is to do analysis, interpretation, followed by recommendation. The entire thing is mentioned in a tabular column in a research design, so that it gives the reader a complete view about what you are going to proceed with your research. Next comes the analysis part. Analysis can be divided into 2 parts. One is descriptive study and the next one is inferential study. Descriptive study will actually give details about the sample. The characteristics of the sample are mentioned in the descriptive study. What you can do in the descriptive is to just identify the mean, median, mode, range and standard deviation, so that you know more about what type of a gender is a majority, what age group are you enquiring, and such details about the sample you would get with the descriptive research. Then comes the inferential research, which focuses on your topic. In the inferential research, as I told, based on the objectives which you framed, you would be conducting study. If you want to find the association between the gender and the smoking habits, you would probably do a chi-square test. If you want to find the relationship between the leadership style and the job performance, you will do a correlation. If you want to further impact on how much leadership style is impacting on the job performance, you would rather go for a regression, which is denoted by R square. ANOVA or t-test are used to find the significant difference between 2 groups. And factor analysis, as I earlier told you, is a dimension reduction technique, where you would be reducing the factors into limiting 4 or 5 factors, where you will understand which factor is influencing the most. At last, you would be having a discriminant or conjoint analysis, which can be variedly used in market research, and a combination of factor analysis and regression analysis is done by way of structured equation model, which will give you whether the conceptual model fits the framework. Once you do the in-depth analysis, the next step is the findings. In the findings, in the literature review, you would always use past tense, because you are going to review the paper which has already been contributed. But findings is the work of you, and so you will be using active words as to what was found, to whom was it meant, how strong. You mentioned percentages as to how strong the data was supported or not supported, and why it mattered in brief lines. Once you finish the findings, it is for you to give recommendations. While you are framing recommendations, you need to understand that who would be the beneficiary of your research. You can maybe have a group-wise recommendation, like you would be willing to give recommendations to your society, for the policy makers, for the employees, for the organization. Segregate recommendations based on each one's needs, so that it gives clarity on what research purpose are you going to propose to. The next one is you use the direct and actionable words, as I told you already, because it is going to be your recommendation towards the purpose of the study. And align that with the findings, and always remember that you keep short and crisp recommendations, so that the reader is able to appreciate what new contribution you have given to the field. The last stage is conclusion. In conclusion, you summarize all the findings of your research report and discuss its significance or implications for the policy makers. You mention limitations, although it is not mandatory. It is optional for you to mention the limitations which you had during the period of the study. At last, importantly, suggest the future directions so that the people who read your paper will get direction to continue with your research project. End note, bibliography, you need to mention references as per the APA format, and appendix, you can attach the questionnaire or tables or charts which you have missed to mention in your earlier chapterization, and of course the glossary where all the jargon words and its explanations are given. So, qualities of a good research report. Now that you have completed your report, it is only for you to present the report in a manner so that people understand what work you have done for your purpose of the study. So, it has to be clarity and coherence. The objectivity and accuracy of your research report has to be met. There should be a logical organization, that is, whatever you have framed in your objectives should be mentioned in your hypothesis, that should flow with your analysis and with your findings and interpretation. Proper citation should be given so that you avoid plagiarism at each and every step, and professionally presentation, you can use Power BI or any other latest tool so that you are able to represent your figures and diagrams in a way which attracts the audience. Common pitfalls which you need to avoid during your research process: lack of focus, poor structuring or poor ordering, and then inadequate referencing. If you miss to mention the referencing, remember that it might go to your plagiarism. Excessive jargon should not be used so that people who read would be able to understand your purpose of the study, and at last you should not ignore the limitations of the study which has to be mentioned. Final thoughts: the research paper reflects on your in-depth knowledge, your clarity and your career aspiration for your research. So, it should be crystal clear so that people know that you have done in-depth on your research. Invest time in drafting, revising and formatting. Most importantly, seek feedback before you submit your paper so that you don't miss on anything. At last, thank you so much for watching this. I hope this would be an eye-opener for you to pursue your career in research. Don't miss to like, share and subscribe MOP Classroom for more such videos. Thank you.